And welcome to our community. Susie Thomas with you this morning. So happy to welcome Christina May. She is from the Stark County Health Department. Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, about this time of year, we always ask you guys to come on over and tell us what we can do to stay healthy during cold and flu season. So, thanks for being here, first of all.
You're welcome. Well, the most important thing that you can do during flu and cold season would be to get your annual flu shot. In addition to that, just good hand washing, staying home when you're ill, staying away from people who are at risk for infection, those with younger children, the senior citizens, or individuals who would be at increased risk for complications from the flu. We recognize now that just covering your mouth and nose with your hands not the best, to use a tissue to cover your mouth and nose and then immediately throw the tissue away to help keep down
Don't
the
stuff
spread
it into your pocket or your purse?
I know that's what a lot of us do, but no, that's not what's recommended.
Disgusting habit when you think about it.
Yeah,
but
just
throw it away.
Absolutely.
Well, I want to talk to you about, let's go back. You said something about stay away from sick people. Okay, the first thing when we get sick is, if we've been home a couple of days, you call the doctor and they say, oh, you're going to need to come in. We get ourselves into clothes, get over to a doctor's office and sit in a room full of sick people. It seems like that's got to be the worst possible place for us to be. So you want to address that in any way?
It can seem like that's the worst possible place to be. However, if you're that ill and you've been ill for, longer than a day or so, that's definitely where you need to be to see if you need to have antibiotics or an antiviral or something like that.
Christina, is there any chance that there are any doctors that are going to pick up the going door to door anymore, making those house calls?
Couldn't answer that.
Wouldn't that be great? That's one for the suggestion box anyway. Okay. I want to talk about the antibiotic or antiviral because a lot of times we sort of self-diagnose. We say, I know what I need is an antibiotic. And one of the problems that we have right now is too many of us have been taking antibiotics when we shouldn't, and now those germs are being able to fight those off. Help me address this.
Well, that would individually be up to each individual circumstance for the person, what they have. Antivirals, doctors' offices like to see you if you have the flu in order to get you an antiviral if it's early enough. Antibiotics aren't usually what you would take for influenza. They would be more like for sinus infection, things like that. But yes, that has been an issue over the years. But that would be more something for a doctor to answer.
A doctor can figure out what is the difference between an antiviral and an antibiotic.
Well, an antiviral is for a viral infection, where an antibiotic you would use if you had, another type of infection, whether it be from
something else.
Something else.
And viral infections we get how? From other people being around? Those are the ones that are transferring from one person to another? Or
Yes.
Okay. So
contaminated surfaces, coughing and sneezing into the air without covering your mouth or nose, things like that are how we pass those viruses from one person to the next.
Do the sprays help? When we spray things like our doorknobs and our telephones and so forth?
Yes.
They do? Okay.
Depending on the product you're using.
Do you have one you recommend?
No, not one specifically.
But some of them are good, and we can, if they say that they kill bacteria.
Then you should be good.
Okay. And is it a good practice?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
What
Anything that has like a 1 to 9 bleach type of or concentration in it is usually good to help kill any of those viruses.
Help me think of all the places that we need to clean like that. I thought of doorknobs and telephones.
Yeah, doorknobs and telephones are huge. Remote controls for your televisions.
Oh, yeah.
Because we all have those on our hands.
Yeah.
Any places or surfaces where your hands would be on a regular basis, you need to try and keep clean.
How scared should we be of money? It's passed through so many hands, and people have...
Yeah, that's a rough one, because it's not really one that you can spray with, with some of the cleaners.
No.
So just using very good hand washing techniques is the best way that after handling money.
Okay, before you eat.
Yes, absolutely, before you eat.
And then what about the hand sanitizer? Is that a good idea, not a good idea?
It's definitely a good idea when you're at a location where you don't have easy access to soap and water.
Okay, so ideally, let's review here. Ideally, wash your hands.
Absolutely. That's
Particularly
the
if you've
best
just
thing.
gone through the drive-through and bought a hamburger, don't touch that hamburger until you either wash your hands or get some hand sanitizer on them. All right. And then I've heard the best way to cough is into the crook of our elbow. Is that still?
Or into your hand if you have a tissue or something that you can dispose of.
Okay, even better.
And the main reason that they stopped saying to cover just with your hand is because then you use your hand to touch all those objects where you're infecting them for other people.
Oh my goodness! I think of the poor church greeter who has
Shakes hands
touched
with
every
everyone.
single
Yes.
person who comes through that door.
Yeah.
And I can't even imagine the germ party that's going on there. So
Absolutely.
just be cautious, do what Mom always said, and wash our hands, and definitely wash our hands before we eat.
Yes.
You said something else, too, that I just want to harp on a little bit. Stay home when you're ill. How do we drive this point home to so many people who are like, well, normally I would, but I've got this very important day at work.
Yeah, they do. They recommend that you stay home for at least a full 24 hours after the last fever that you have. So, and that's not including fever-reducing medication. It's because a lot of times people will say, well, I haven't had a fever for more than 24 hours, but they were taking fever-reducing medication during that time. So they do recommend that you stay home and stop the spread of those germs for at least 24 hours after the last fever in order to assure that you're not contagious anymore.
This would be more philosophical, but what is it about us that makes us feel like we're heroes and that we're doing something admirable by going to work sick? I've heard so many people say, excuse me, I've got the flu. I'm thinking, why are you here? What is it about us, that drive?
I think that's each individual person. I think it's partly how we are as a society today, that we're so driven for work, and some people don't really have an option as far as their work goes. They don't have sick days or things like that. But it's definitely the best way to prevent the spread would be to stay home for at least that 24 hours after the fever's over.
Do you still starve a fever and feed a cold?
I don't. I don't really think that's. I think that's an old wives' tale.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm an old wife, so it's one I've heard of. But it just seems like eat if you're hungry and don't eat if you're not. That makes sense. Yes.
That definitely does
Okay.
make sense. Yeah.
How do we know if it's really flu or if it's just something that is a bad cold? I've heard a lot of people say, oh, I had the flu, and they may or may not actually had influenza.
Yeah, well, the true influenza tends to have those upper respiratory symptoms. I know a lot of people tend to confuse a stomach virus with the flu, but the true influenza has those upper respiratory symptoms. And it tends to, the biggest difference that it seems to be between the cold and the flu is the cold kind of comes on more gradual, where the influenza hits you fast, where you feel completely fine, and then all of a sudden you feel achy. You have that feeling like maybe you're getting a fever. The sinuses are starting to fill up, your nose is starting to run, and it hits you very quickly, where the cold symptoms may slowly increase over a period of days.
Are there two kinds of flu, like respiratory flu and stomach flu? Or does it all come in one big ball, or is that...
I think they're really more stomach viruses.
Okay.
I think it's just something that we as a society have gotten used to calling that a stomach flu. They're
Right.
really more of a stomach virus. There's a variety of different things that can cause stomach viruses. But the biggest difference between those is going to be the symptoms that you have.
Because we've done that and we sort of just talk about flu, or I've had the flu, or I'm feeling flu-y, we almost downplay the seriousness of what true flu is.
Absolutely.
And let's talk about that seriousness and why it's so important to get a flu shot.
Well, one of the most important things is people tend to downplay, like you said, the flu, but we do have many people from across the United States that die on a yearly basis from influenza. I know so far this year alone, we have had at least a couple pediatric influenza deaths across the United States. Not here locally, but across the United States. And there are many, many people and it's usually those people who are at increased risk for complications from the flu, like individuals with respiratory complications, chronic bronchitis, asthma, people who might have diabetes or have other types of health problems.
Then definitely get a flu shot if you fall in that category. The very young and the very old?
Yes.
How young?
Babies can get a flu shot as young as 6 months of age.
Wow. And then if your baby in your life is younger than that, make sure everyone who is going to be near that baby has had theirs.
Absolutely.
That's a big rule in our family. Yeah, for sure. Well, let's talk about this year's flu. First of all, I hear it kind of arrived early. What's up with that?
Yeah, it's very hard to pinpoint the normal time frame for influenza in a community. Over the last probably 15, 20 years, we have had the majority of our flu seasons that the peak has been in January. So the peak is kind of like the midpoint of the flu season. So the majority of them, they kind of peak in January. But yes, we have seen cases. We've had a couple influenza-associated hospitalizations here locally. We've monitored the testing that the doctor's offices do. And the other thing that's a little interesting so far this year has been that the B strains of flu virus have been a little more prevalent at the beginning of this season than what we would normally see.
What's a B strain?
There's different strains of influenza virus, and the flu vaccines cover both A strain vaccines and B strain vaccines, or B strain viruses. So there's a variety. There's hundreds of different types. So
I won't really
want to go into those specifics because it would be a little more complicated than we want to talk about today.
Sure.
But normally the A is influenza A is the ones that we start to see at the beginning of the flu season. But this year it's been the B. Viruses.
Okay. So the one that usually brings up the tail arrived early.
Yes.
Got it. So thinking of like a train, the caboose kind of arrived before the engine. Got it. So with this in mind, when is the best time to get a flu shot?
Well, ideally, you want to get your flu shot before flu season starts.
Yes.
But because it's really difficult for us to pinpoint exactly when flu is going to start or hit a community, with all the international travel that we do recommend that individuals start getting their flu shot in. You can start as early as the end of October, but November is usually the best time.
Okay.
It does take 2 weeks for that flu vaccine to have its full effectiveness. So you want to try and get it prior to when ideally you would have it before, 2 weeks before we hit January, which is when we know we're going to have our peak. But they do still recommend that people continue to get flu vaccinations all the way up as long as we're still seeing flu viruses.
And how long does that tend to be? I know this is different from year to year, but when is flu season over? When can we go, whew?
Yeah, most of the flu vaccines expire in June. So we can give flu vaccine all the way up till June. But here locally, most of the time, we see those viruses start to wane or slow down around March.
Okay. So, well, that's good. There's somebody listening and they say, yeah, I never get a flu shot and I never get sick.
Flu. Yeah,
or I know somebody who got a flu shot and then got the flu. What do you have to say to those people?
Okay, well, one of the first things we hear quite frequently is, I got my flu shot and it gave me the flu. The flu vaccine that we administer now is a killed strain of the vaccine, so you do not actually get the flu from the vaccine. It is normal to have some minor reactions when you get any type of a vaccination. So you could get a mild fever, you could have a little bit of body aches, but it's nothing like the actual true influenza.
And if I understand right, these are things happening as our bodies are building up resistance to it.
Yes.
So that's a good thing.
It is, yes.
That little ache is saving you from a big ache.
Absolutely, yes.
All right. Thank you. We are going to be back. We got lots more ground to cover here, but we're visiting with Christina May. She's from the Stark County Health Department, and we'll be back after these words. You're listening to Our Community.